Vampires are back in business, and truth be told, despite many forms of questionable fiction trying its damnedest to take away the eternal swagger and glamour that comes with being an immortal blood-sucking demigod, vampires have never not been cool. Yeah. Because thankfully, despite for the most part their pale ashen image being driven through the mud for a while, on the sidelines, literature has always been consistently creating some of the most awesomely terrifying depictions of the bloodthirsty paragons of gore and immortality that we love. Thankfully for us, there are some awesome entries to choose from for this list, so let's get to it. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, top 5 scary videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 scariest vampires in literature. Roll the clip.
Sometimes the world no longer needs a hero. Sometimes what it needs is a monster.
And you believe you know what it is to be a monster?
For the curious amongst you, that clip was from the massively underrated 2014 semi-historical vampire pseudo-slasher Dracula Untold, which is a surprisingly awesome vampire flick and pretty fitting for this blood-based literature list, because come on, we all know that vampires in literature are massively underrated anyway, for the most part. And that's because, while the progenitor of all vampire fiction, Bram Stoker's Dracula, is always held up as the benchmark for it, and often to its detriment, because I've got news for you, vampires have evolved, man, and now they're much more terrifying. Obviously we have to pay our dues to Dracula though, but from an even deeper stance of literature, we have to give homage to John Polidori's The Vampire, with a Y, written way back in 1819, the progenitor of even Dracula himself. Vampires, man, they're ancient. Kicking off at number 5, I Am Legend. Zombie vampires. Who knew that such a hodgepodge could become a genuinely terrifying hallmark of literature? Well, for those of you that have read Richard Matheson's phenomenal 1954 sci-fi horror I Am Legend, you'll know that's exactly what it is, genuinely terrifying. And although it was a half-decent movie, please don't lump this novel in with the 2007 Will Smith blockbuster, because the entire film kind of missed the point. But hey, that's not why we are here, is it? Written by Richard Matheson, I Am Legend tells a tale of Robert Neville, a reluctant scientist and the sole survivor of a vile pandemic that has ravaged the planet, a blood plague that seemingly turns humans into vampires. Throughout the opening of the novel, it is alluded to that this plague was a result of a devastating war, and this plague was openly spread via mosquitoes kicked up in the subsequent debris of society, which, you know, is already a pretty terrifying notion, because that could happen. Now, I won't get into too much detail about the actual narrative, because there is a lot to be enjoyed in this novel, and if you can get your hands on it, I'd highly recommend reading it. It's not too long at all, and Matheson paints a vividly bleak picture throughout. The reason that I Am Legend's zombie vampire plague-ridden carriers end up on this list though is because of Matheson's attention to scientific detail, and as Robert Neville scours the wasteland of Los Angeles, learning more about the swarms of fleshy, bloodthirsty rippers that roam the streets at night, we're gradually given a real sense of physicality as to the bleak feral existence Matheson's vampires are subject to. And I won't even go into detail about the ending without fear of spoilers, but if you're partial to a bit of existentialism in vampire literature, then please read this novel, because its ending is a whole different kettle of fish. It will make you think twice about vampire folklore and the legend that comes with it. I Am Legend. Swinging in at number 4, Fever Dream. Again, if you're in the mood for a fantastically written, relatively concise novel about terrifying vampires and the resounding implications that come with immortality, please read George R.R. Martin's fantastic 1982 novel, Fever Dream. And yes, that's correct, before George was weaving Westeros and creating perhaps the finest fantasy series ever written, he was also indulging himself on immortal vampires that commandeered a Mississippi riverboat in the mid-1800s. Yeah. Now, if I had to choose purely from a technical perspective, Fever Dream may actually be one of the most complete and compelling works of vampire fiction ever written. If you're a fan of Martin's prose, then you'll find exactly the same kind of verve and style here, and what it serves to do is wholeheartedly humanize his immortal vampires and turn them into a much more complex kind of monster. Like with most of Martin's work, there is no black and white here, but instead shades of grey, and as you may imagine, that's a pretty difficult thing to do with vampires. However, the reason it only makes its way in at number 4 though is that purely from a horror perspective, it's not entirely as terrifying as some of our other entries, but in terms of depth and complexity, Fever Dream is second to none. It tells the tale of Abner Marsh, a grizzled steamboat captain in the mid-1800s, who is down on his luck during a particularly bleak financial crisis, but is then contacted by a mysterious, soft-spoken aristocrat, a man named Joshua York, who promises to finance a brand new riverboat for Abner, an opulent vessel named Fever Dream. And whilst obviously yes, this novel is centered on vampires, I'll say no more because the way the immortal society of vampirism is woven into this novel is a beautiful thing to witness, and the subsequent opposing blood masters that are spawned from it is a concept rarely looked at in vampire fiction. 2 words: Vampire Jesus. Next up at number 3, The Vampire Court. And whilst throughout the fantastic Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher there are many forms of vampires and the subsequent vampire courts that come with them, there's no doubting that the most terrifying, malevolent and purely evil vampire organization is the White Court, although thankfully for us they're all pretty damn evil anyway, and Harry Dresden has been doing his damnedest to bring about their downfall one by one, as is the case with the Red Court. Sorry, spoilers. Now, vampires in Jim Butcher's universe come in many different shapes and forms, almost like a melting pot of pretty much every vampire custom and creation that we've seen in fiction, which is pretty damn awesome in its own right, but it's with the societal structure and ancient hierarchy where Butcher's vampires truly shine. The White Court, for example, is an order of vampires that feed purely from human emotion, and they satiate their hunger through the consumption of essentially the human spirit. Because of their propensity for life force rather than actual human blood, the White Court prefers to avoid any direct confrontation with their enemies, and for the most part they're a court of schemers and ploy makers hidden within the shadows, pulling the strings. Essentially, the White Court are the East Indian trading company of the vampire world, and they pull the strings on the rest of the blood-sucking immortals around them. On the other hand though, there was also the Red Court, a vile sect of fleshy, bat-like humanoid creatures that use the glamour of a skin mask to disguise themselves as humans, living and preying on society for years on end. As more akin to the traditional vampires of legend, the Red Court were particularly dark in their approach to feasting off of human blood, and operated mainly in Central and South America, where they reared entire villages of humans like cattle to feed upon. Then there's the Black Court, a diminished sect of vampires who were essentially born from the stereotypical Dracula of legend, but were hunted and eventually destroyed thanks to Bram Stoker's novel, which in Butcher's universe was published as a how-to guide for the layman to hunt down and kill vampires. Don't you just love the Dresden Files? Swinging in at number 2, The Vampiric. We cannot make this list without laying down Brian Lumley's incredible Necroscope series, and I'm fully aware that many of you Top 5 Scary viewers are particular fans of his resounding horror series. The thing is though, Lumley completely shook up the concept of what makes a vampire so fervently that in some cases it's hard to tell where monster of folklore legend begins and alien parasitic monstrosity ends. And believe me, don't worry, I say that as a good thing, not a bad thing. In Lumley's Necroscope series, first written in 1986, gone are the classic interpretations of the vampire legend, and instead Lumley's vampires are a leech-like parasite from an ancient world deep in the cosmos. Through a painful and grotesque process, these alien leeches attach to their host and begin a symbiotic life cycle that grants them their immortality of legend, as well as many other devious superhuman machinations. What makes Lumley's Vampiric so awesome though is that they're essentially the vampire version of Marvel's symbiotes, and their life cycle is wholly similar to that of a fungal creature, transforming its host through a slow, spore-ridden process that turns them into the immortal villains that populate Lumley's Necroscope series. Because of that incredibly unique process though, the Vampiric leeches can also infect other non-human entities, such as in a few cases foxes or wolves, and then so begins Lumley's absolutely awesome fictional explanation as to the nature of werewolves and lycanthropes that populate his horror series. It's never been done before. The thing is, in Necroscope, the Vampiric are so damn ancient and so adept at understanding the parasitic process that created them. In the later series, they move into an entire industry of breeding lesser versions of vampires to enact their bidding, whether across the earth or on Starside. In fact, Lumley's depiction of vampirism in the Necroscope series is pretty damn bleak, and the one true evil against humanity are the vampiri, because eventually even the most purest of hearts succumb to their evil will. Also, vampire cannibalism. Yeah, that one's not been done that much before. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, the higher vampire. And whilst we're talking about hunting vampires, we cannot talk about bloodthirsty monsters in literature without taking note on the resounding works of Andrzej Sapkowski with the Witcher saga that rightfully deserves its place at our number 1 spot. Now, in my opinion, Sapkowski's depiction is the most complete, compelling and intriguing creation of vampires in horror, in the whole of literature. And I know that's pretty damn hyperbolic, but really, if you read his work or played any of CD Projekt Red's fantastic video game series, you'll know exactly exactly the impact that vampires have on this world. And I say world because the most intriguing notion of vampires in the Witcher saga is that, not unlike Lumley's Necroscope series, these ancient entities are from another planet entirely. Well, not exactly another planet, so to speak, but another dimension, another sphere. Now, I'll try not to spoil anything, but to be fair, speaking about the conjunction of the spheres isn't exactly giving anything away. In Sapkowski's world, vampires aren't created or turned or otherwise conjured into existence. They're born, just like humans are, and exist as corporeal beings who can manipulate their body at a molecular level in blood and matter, just as easy as we can breathe. Over 1,000 years before the Witcher saga began, during the conjunction of the spheres, different realities where monsters and magical entities reside freely on their own plane collided and merged with our world, which eventually necessitated the need for the Order of the Wolf and the many witches that came with it. As you know, someone had to try and keep a lid on all that chaotic magic going on, right? Cheers, Geralt. Honestly, I could speak about the Witcher saga all day, but as far as vampires are concerned, there is so much to feast on. The Bruxa, the Katakan, the Alp, grotesque mutagenic versions of vampires created from humans and the corporeal dimension beings that are absolutely terrifying. Regis, the awesome ancient vampire who's best friends forever with Geralt, the unseen elder, the list goes on and on. And if you're a fan of vampire fiction and are yet to delve into the works of the Witcher series, please consider this as a reminder, because as far as vampires are concerned, there's nothing else like it, and it's the best for a reason. Well, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 scariest vampires in literature. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Disagree? Have any more to add? Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as any choice picks of your own. Before we depart from today's video, if you'd like to continue on with your vampire, werewolf, or monster binge, then please make sure you check out our neatly compiled monstrous playlist floating neatly at the side. And you know, enjoy yourself. That's what it's all about, right? Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in today's video. Just stick around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video, or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscriber. And I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finn. You've been watching top 5 scary videos. And until next time, you take it easy.